Now, wouldn't it be nice just to plant a seed from the kind of fruit that you wanted and let it grow and produce that fruit? Unfortunately, seed won't produce the same kind of fruit from which the seed came. And so we start from the seed. After it grows 1 year, we must take a piece of wood from the tree that we want to reproduce and attach it to the seedling. This is known as grafting. Now, there are several kinds of grafting or types of grafting, but I'll be talking to you about two particular types of which I'm more familiar, and I guess we could say are sort of the standard. One is sign grafting. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The other is what we call bud grafting. Now, in order to reproduce a tree that will grow this particular apple, and I like this particular apple, it's a type of Golden Delicious called Pure Gold, we must take a piece of this tree and graft it on to that seedling that we mentioned earlier. Now, just to demonstrate, we'll simply reach up here, cut this piece of branch off. We'll make what we call a bud stick out of this, using the buds in the center part of this branch. Clip off the leaves, leaving the stems of the leaves for a little handle to hold to in a minute. Okay, we have what we call a bud stick, and we'll need to take a bud from this bud stick to put onto that seedling that we'll show you in just a few moments. Now, if you'll notice, right under this leaf stem, there's a bud. Hopefully you can see that little bud right there. Well, that's the part that'll be growing. In order to get that bud, we simply take a good sharp knife, and that's the first thing we've got to think about, is having a sharp knife, cut barely under the skin or the bark, about an inch below and an inch above, or 3/4 below to 3/4 above. Just lift it off like this. That's called a bud shield. Now we'll show you how to insert that into the seedling tree so that we can grow the kind of tree that produces this fruit. Okay, we've moved over to our seedling that we're going to put this bud onto. We'll simply take this seedling tree, make a cut about 2 inches long, just barely through the bark. Then we come up here, we make a horizontal cut. We call that T-budding because of the shape of the cut that we make. Then we take our knife, simply peel that bark back. Being careful not to disturb the cambium layer between the bark and the woody part. That's where growth takes place. Okay, we have our cut made. We take our bud, hold to the little leaf stem, simply insert that, slip it right down under the bark. There's a little bit left over, we just clip that off with a knife. Then we take what we call a budding strip, which is simply a piece of rubber that we wrap right around that cut, firm but not too tight. Then we come above the stem, right across that horizontal cut that we made. Then we make a self-holding loop there. Just pull that out, tuck that in under, turn it loose, and that's got it. Now, we just leave that bud like that until next spring. This bud will remain dormant this year. Next spring, just as growth begins, we'll come out to the orchard here, take our pruners, cut this off about 4 or 5 inches above the bud. Just cut this top off completely. The bud will immediately start growing, and it'll have a tendency to grow out this direction since it is a bud, so we'll use this stem part sticking up here to support this bud and tie it up to this to make it grow up straight. That's basically the way we do bud grafting. Okay, the preceding grafting, as we've said, is called bud grafting, and it's usually done, generally done, in late summer, about this time. This next one we call sign grafting, and we have to cut our wood while it's dormant, which would be any time after the leaves fall until they start, the growth starts in the spring. I like to collect the grafting wood, or sign as we call it, along in early March, late February or early March. Wrap it in moist paper, seal it in a plastic bag, keep it in the refrigerator until just about the time growth begins in April. Remember, this sign has to be dormant, which is not the case now. We've just cut this one, so it's not dormant, but hopefully we can demonstrate with a sign that isn't dormant. Okay, as I said earlier, the first thing we need to think about is a sharp knife. We need a knife that is sharp enough to shave. If it won't shave, it's not sharp enough to graft with. So we have a sharp knife. We have our bud stick cut with about 4 buds on it. Sometimes we have to eliminate this bottom bud to have room to work. We prepare our sign by making a long slanted cut. It's good if you can make that in one cut, but I'm usually not steady enough to do it all in one cut, so we have to trim it just a bit. We want a long, smooth cut. Okay? Now, this is the tongue part of what is called a whip and tongue graft. This is very dangerous with a sharp knife. You have to be very careful you don't slip and cut a finger. We want to start the knife just about halfway between the toe and the pith here, which would be in about that position. You've got to be very careful. Don't push straight down on your knife, but simply rock it a little bit until we're able to get it cut in there just a ways. Now we have our tongue cut that will lock into the other part that we'll demonstrate right here on this part of the tree. We find our seedling that we want about the size of our sign, so we cut it the same way, prepare it the same way, make a long slanted cut about the same length as the one we just prepared. Do it the same way, start about 1/3 of the way down or about halfway between the toe and the pith. Rock the knife down very slowly, very gently. Then we have it prepared. As you can see, this will now open up and the tongue slips right in there and locks together. We now take what is called a grafting strip, which is bigger and longer than the budding strip. Start at the bottom, very similar fashion. Hold the grafting strip firm, not too tight. Wrap it right up to the top of the cut that we've made. And then wrap it right on back down so that we can tie off down here on the solid wood and not up here on the graft. If we tied it up here, we'd be likely to break this loose and our graft would be unsuccessful. Just like before, we make a loop, pull the end through it, pull up on it, we have it. So that's basically the way we do the whip and tongue grafting.